During this time when the world's attention is once again focused on the Middle East, it's been a bit more than a week since a U.S. drone killed General Qasem Soleimani. Long considered the #2 man in the Iranian government, the shockwaves were immediate. They continue to this day. Was it warranted? What kind of payback will be coming from Iran? Will Congress act to curb this president's powers to launch attacks? Many questions. We won't take them all. But I'm joined this morning by Joe Barnes, the Bonner Means Baker Fellow at Baker Institute at Rice University. Joe knows all about this subject. He knows this region well, too, having been a career diplomat for 14 years, including time in the Middle East, been at Rice since '95. Mr. Barnes, thank you for coming in this morning. We won't talk about the wisdom of the strike, the drone strike by the president, because the politicians will do that, and they'll do that a lot in the coming weeks. But from your standpoint, what about this strike may be considered positive for the United States?
Well, yeah, I mean, positively, apparently, the assassination or the killing of Soleimani has sort of put Tehran on warning. And we can see that by the way they responded in the first instance, militarily, by the missile attacks on U.S. bases. There's a lot of stories out there that they may have indirectly let us know that these places might be targeted. There were a modest amount of missiles. So to the extent that Iran responded in a relatively modest way, the administration might have sort of set a red line. But there are cons in addition to this.
Yeah, and I want to get into that as well. What factors do you look at when you take into account the problems that come about as a result of this killing, short-term and long-term?
All right. In the short term, we're clearly going to have a problem with the Iraqi government at this point. The Iraqi parliament passed I think, a resolution calling for U.S. troops to leave. Whether or not that we're actually are going to leave is unclear at this point. But the main point is that we clearly made the U.S.-Iraqi relationship very, very difficult, because remember, you know, we killed this man on Iraqi soil. Right. As he had just after he arrived at Baghdad airport. So we have problems with it. Raises problems with the Iraqi the government. It also leads to the possibility of further retribution. Now, this retribution is probably not going to be like the one we've seen, a direct attack on U.S. bases by the Iranian military itself.
They've been pretty good over the last number of years at being able to distance themselves by using their proxies.
Yes, they're sort of a master at this, in fact. And that's where I expect to see things in the weeks and and months ahead. Now, the problem arises here, which is how will the Trump administration respond to such attacks, particularly if a U.S. individual is killed? Because recall, this last series of escalations occurred after a Iranian-backed militia killed an American contractor, right? So the question arises, how will the Trump administration deal with proxy attacks that lead to U.S. fatalities in the future? And that is unknown at this point.
We have a lot of potential for more military conflict of some sort or another. This is obviously an oil-rich region. How will we be impacted in the United States as a result of that? I saw oil prices spike up a little bit. They settled back down. The fact that the United States is a less oil-dependent than it used to be, does that factor into?
Yes, it does. It does factor into it somewhat, right? We are, we're probably net zero or close to zero in terms of imports and exports on oil, although we still import certain kinds of oil, even as we export others. And our economy is less energy intensive. But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be any impact in the United States, or more importantly, perhaps, in the global economy, were, let's say, there to be a naval conflict between the United States and Iran in the Straits of Hormuz and nearby. That would probably lead to, if there was such a conflict, it would lead to a sharp increase in oil prices, although we don't know the duration. It depends on how long the conflict lasts, for instance.
We talked a little bit before we started taping this about the Middle East over the last number of years. It has just not been settled at all. There are a lot of things that have been going on here. It's a really complicated question, is it not? What is it going to take? You were there. What kind of progress is being made towards stability in the Middle East? Or in this case, I know the president said he made this killing to stop war instead of having war, but I'm not sure, based upon what I'm seeing, that is actually the case.
Well, look, American foreign policy in the Middle East of the last 20 years hasn't really produced a glowing record of success. There's been intermittent successes, but the truth of the matter is that at least since our invasion of Iraq in 2003, it's been a violent and dangerous region, although it was frankly dangerous before. The point is, it's not clear that these U.S. interventions have substantially or materially improved the situation. On the other hand, you could argue if we hadn't done anything, maybe the situation would be worse, which is a sort of frightening thought when you think about it. The truth of the matter is, it's an incredibly complex region. It's a region that is bound and in many ways tortured by history. And that includes the U.S. history in the Middle East. In other words, we can't go in there with a blank slate. We have former commitments, we have former actions, we have alliances, we have traditional rivalry. So it's so hard to come up with a successful foreign policy in the Middle East because there are so many competing elements.
And there's an issue of trust involved in all of this as well. And there's a couple of things going on here. Number one, the Iran nuclear deal. A lot of people say, well, that's a good thing, that's a bad thing. The politicians will weed that out. But the president withdrew from that. And so the Iranians have no reason really to enter into other agreements at that point going forward. Then there were the internal workings of Iran, which they were having a lot of issues internally. We saw video of thousands of people in the streets in Iran over the last number of weeks because they were upset about what's going on in the government. Now they're out by the thousands mourning General Soleimani as a result of what's going on, going from anti-government to pro-government against the United States. How does this complicate what needs to happen?
Well, it does. I mean, look, surely the Soleimani killing created in Iran what you'd call a rally around the flag effect. This is true of any country which is attacked. Doesn't necessarily mean that all the people that were mourning Soleimani are great fans of the Iranian government, but it does mean that they're nationalists and they're very proud of being Iranian, and they consider his killing an affront to their sort of sense of nationhood. This is very similar to what we would get in the United States or any other country in the world. You get these effects, right? It's one thing to argue with your cousin. It's another thing when somebody comes in and beats up your cousin, and then you stand up for him.
So we see this from they're way across the ocean. It's way away from us. All of that's going on. With what's happening here recently, are we more safe, or are we as safe or about the same that we've ever been, considering the instability of that region?
Well, you mean safe in terms of terrorist attacks in the United States?
Right.
I don't know of any evidence suggesting that Iran has a substantial proxy terrorist network in the United States. But we do know that, Iran has got, particularly around the Middle East, but also perhaps in Europe, they've had, they have people that they can turn to do bad things. But this is strongest in the Middle East. But you can't rule anything out. I mean, who would have thought in 2001 that a bunch of people with carpet cutters on airplanes would kill 3,000 people?
Good point. A little bit more than a year left in this current administration, assuming that there will be another one if there isn't. What do you think this administration is going to be known for? You said 20 years in the Middle East policy has not been very good. What about the last 3?
Well, I fear that unless there is some sort of breakthrough, and it doesn't have to be for a complete agreement, but some sort of breakthrough in terms of movement towards some sort of better relationship between the United States and Iran, and between Iran and its neighbors, notably Saudi Arabia. I fear that the legacy of the Trump administration might well be that they took a bad situation and made it worse.
Joe Barnes, thank you for your insight. We'll have you come back when there's more to talk about, and I think there will be.
There's always more to talk about.
Thank you, Joe.